Hello, everyone, and welcome on in to Press Coverage, where we help you gain an edge in fantasy football. I'm your host, as always, Wyatt Bertolone. With me tonight, the one and only Jake Ciely, to talk about some wide receiver ADPs and give you some advice on what to do with these players at these costs. Jake, first off, how are you doing, and what have you been working on?
The how you're doing question is an interesting one. I'm doing this podcast. Can you? Yeah, you can see it with one less tooth. My crown fell off today, so I have to go for emergency surgery in the morning, depending on when you're listening to this. So that's how my day's been going. But otherwise, good. As you can see, it's not affecting my talk. As apparently it is. Let's talk about.
Now you're in your own head now.
Yeah, you see that? You see how that works? I mean, my tooth isn't in my head. Over the Athletic. So I just had the projections come out a few weeks ago, which I let people customize. They download it, and so they could be like, hey, I don't agree with you. I think a target share is going to be blank, and you can see how it affects your rankings. And now we're kind of doing a run-through charting-wise to kind of see, like, okay, these are where their tiers actually break off differently from my ranks and differently from the projections to say, like, kind of the strategy. I don't know if you saw Ryan Heath tweeted something out for Fantasy Points about how, like, there's only a few players that end up making the difference in a draft, and this kind of gives you like a visual, like a different attack of kind of a similar topic.
Yeah, it's a great point by Ryan Heath. It's one of those things that you learn after years of doing this, where there's only actually a few players that really like make a difference over the season in a given fantasy season that like really make the difference.
Yeah.
But we got some players to talk about. Maybe one of these players we've got today could be one of these players who makes that massive difference in a fantasy season. Our first one is Rashee Rice, who's kind of the talk of the town right now, ever since it seemed like that all this legal trouble will at least go away for this year. It's seemingly that way right now. So some price points over on Fast Draft: wide receiver 13, underdog in FFPC. He's wide receiver 12. Last year, he just played those 3 full games before getting his knee blown up by his own quarterback. But in those games, 21.6 points per game in PPR. Fantastic. And it was kind of a building on the trend from the end of his rookie season, in which over his last 6 games, he was averaging 18.5 PPR points per game. We kind of know it took a little bit of time for him to ramp up and actually start playing a majority of the snaps, but once he was highly productive. Now, he was doing it in this kind of cheat code role, in all the short and intermediate stuff for the Chiefs. How are you feeling about Rashee Rice coming into 2025 now?
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up the last few games from his rookie season, because we saw similar for Xavier Worthy, and I think that's why at this price point, I'm kind of out. Like, it's not that I'm out on Rashee Rice and that I don't think he can be the clear lead. It's that it's also different. I want to take one step back. It is also a little bit different than it was 3, 4, 5 years ago, where like even being the clear lead, you're almost 50-50 with Travis Kelce. I could see a scenario in 2025 where Travis Kelce's the third. But that's including Xavier Worthy. And when you say, okay, maybe both of them are getting 50 to 60% of the target share, seems pretty aggressive, because at that point, we're basically burying Kelce. He's just done at that point. But I bring up the Worthy thing, and I know you know this, is like I said, they both finished similarly in their rookie seasons, where I don't know that we're going to get the Rashee Rice target volume from 2 years ago, from the beginning of last year, because of Xavier Worthy. And if I was talking about, like, I have him at wide receiver 18, I feel comfortable, even if you want to take him at like 16, just to be like, hey, I really do believe he can be the focal point. I want to buy in. I'd be cool with that. It's the problem of paying basically wide receiver 1 value with the other names that are on the board, who I know, if you look at those names, are definitively their team's lead. Ladd McConkey, Terry McLaurin, I know he's got the contract situation going on, but those kind of players where I know they're the lead. And I do think Rashee Rice is the lead, but I think most people agree there's a non-zero chance that Xavier Worthy out-targets Rashee Rice. Now, I don't think it's going to happen. I would say that's probably a 10 to 15% chance, but it's enough on the table that it makes me hesitant to buy in at wide receiver 12 or 13.
Yeah, Xavier Worthy, you talk about what he did at the end of his rookie year. A lot of what he did was similar to what Rashee Rice was doing for the offense. He was getting a lot of these shorter manufactured touches. So you have to decide, do you think that goes all back to Rashee Rice, or does Worthy get some of that? I kind of lean that I think Rashee Rice is for the most part going to get it back, because I think that he can't do all the other things. I think the Kansas City Chiefs found the one thing that he's really good at, and he's probably not the best at doing the other stuff. So I imagine he's going to get a lot of that back. But I think they can coexist for each other. I do kind of think that Kelce might not contribute as much. I mean, looking at last year, even, he wasn't contributing that much. It's small sample size. I know we have to do that with these situations right here. He wasn't doing that much before the Rice injury. Got a lot of his production after the Rice injury, obviously. Um, but I think it's going to run through those wide receivers. High volume drafting in fast draft, in underdog, those kinds of places. I want to make sure I have exposure to Rashee Rice, but the price
Right.
is aggressive. Like if I'm drafting a couple redraft teams, I'm being hard pressed to make that click in those redraft leagues. I'd much rather take a shot on Xavier Worthy at his cost when he now goes 2, 3 rounds later than Rashee Rice.
And that's the biggest thing, like I said, I giving the formats, I'm not going to say I'm coming away with zero worthy. It's just going to take probably him falling to even 14 just to be like, hey, you know what? Like you just brought up, I want to get a piece. Like I want to just in case. And you bring up the share, and let's just even say that Travis Kelce completely falls to the wayside as the third option. The issue I have is because and I agree with you, is what if they use Rashee Rice only in that vein, which means 10, maybe 11 yards per reception. So now we're talking about somebody who needs 130, 140 targets to reach that wide receiver one status, even with 7 or 8 receiving touchdowns. So just saying there's a lot of volume that's kind of needed if they even say what you're saying. I'm not coming for you. And I was like, I actually agree with a lot what you're saying. It's like if they say that this is what you do because you can't do the other stuff, Xavier Worthy can, and now you almost kind of have to have like a Jarvis Landry peak season. And like that's my other hesitation here. And it can happen. It's just at wide receiver 12, I'm probably going to see very few shares of him.
How do you feel about the prospects of the Chiefs ramping up their offense the way it was in years past compared to the last couple of years? Because, over the last couple of years, they've been kind of able to, I don't want to say walk into the playoffs, but they haven't had as much of a fight getting to the playoffs. Whereas this year, we've got this division is getting pretty tough, I would say. The Chargers are on their way up, Broncos on their way up. I think the Raiders could be spunky as a team and really put up a fight. Do you think there's a chance like they're going to have to put up more offense this year?
I don't know that they have to. I think maybe they need to figure out another dimension to their offense, mostly because what we've seen recently from Patrick Mahomes hasn't necessarily been like this offense isn't as aggressive as it used to be. I mean, we're still talking about 600 attempts throughout the season. No, it's not 640 or 650, but they are still passing plenty. It's more so what we've seen the Chiefs offense turn into. We're talking about that amazing season now we're talking a long time ago, 2018 with the 50 touchdowns, but even a few years after that, you're talking about where Mahomes was regularly sitting in that 8.5 yards per completion range, and now we're talking like 7.5. Last year, I think it fell under 7, if I'm correct. So that's what I want to see. And maybe Rashee Rice being able to, as you said, stay in like, hey, you do this, that's going to be your game, that 7 yards. But Xavier Worthy now brings that added deep threat that we've kind of been missing since Tyreek Hill. And maybe that helps, but the one area where I still don't see necessarily happening is I can see Mahomes being more efficient. I just don't think he's going to get back to 640, 650 pass attempts over a full season, because it's not just that they can walk into the playoffs. And I think last year might kind of give them a bad taste in their mouth to say, like, let's do a little bit more this year. But at the same time, their defense is so good that they just don't need to play those kind of games. They don't need to play the games from 2020 where it's like, you got to win 42-35. And we loved it. And it was a hell of a lot of fun to watch and in fantasy. But I just don't know that this Chiefs team needs to do that anymore.
Well, a little bit selfishly, I hope that defense takes a step back and we can get a little bit more production.
I think we all do. I'm with you.
All right. Our next player of the day is Marvin Harrison Jr. Wide receiver prices. We've got fast draft, wide receiver 16, underdog, wide receiver 15, FFPC, wide receiver 18. Just 11.6 PPR points per game in 2024, which was a disappointment because he was steamed all the way up in drafts before the 2024 season, and he didn't perform that well. Just an efficiency-wise, 42nd yards per team pass attempt among wide receivers, 58th in yards per out run. Part of it, though, is Kyler Murray, 64th in catchable target rate for Marvin Harrison, because Kyler had a tough time actually getting to him. Now, I still think that Marvin Harrison is a talented player. I like the prospect he was coming into the NFL. I think that's still kind of there for him. The problem is nothing changed for the situation. This is still Kyler Murray, the same person who had trouble getting him the ball. There's still Trey McBride, who became a dominant target hog in the offense. So what do we do with that when he's been kind of steamed back up again? Like, he didn't fall that far from where he was being drafted last year. I'm having a tough time with this one. What do you think?
Yeah, this is interesting to me because I felt like I was going to be in on Marvin Harrison this year, actually, for my breakout wide receivers Marvin Harrison was closer to the top of that list of the 7 wide receivers. He was the second wide receiver I mentioned. And I said in that one, like I kind of did breakouts a little bit differently instead of just being, oh, they're going to break out. I did chances to be a wide receiver 2 or a wide receiver 1 for him. And then deeper was like, do you get to be in a wide receiver 3 or 2? And there's going to be another name we talk about. I promise I'm going to be in on some of these guys. At this cost, I am out because, I said like the likelihood that Marvin Harrison's a wide receiver 2, I gave him like a 7 out of 10. He wasn't that far off last year, even as a rookie. The problem is the wide receiver 1, which again, wide receiver 15 or 16, you're kind of pushing up there for that. I think there's only like a 4 out of 10 chance, and that's what I gave him. And like whatever it was, like where you come up with the numbers, it's mostly gut. Like I think 4 times out of 10 over the season, like it would happen. But the reason why is to the positives, he's still Marvin Harrison. He's still one of the better wide receivers we've seen in a few years. But the one aspect, and it's not just Kyler Murray, the one aspect that we did have concerns about, I say we as in anybody who was analyzing him last year, is coming out of college, we had some concerns. They were minute, but we had some concerns about his separation, his route running. And like those were the 2 things. And I would feel better if they didn't manifest themselves over the course of his entire rookie season. And to go back to Kyler Murray, we all know earlier in the year where Marvin Harrison was basically waving his arms and doing jumping jacks, so like, look back at me. That's the rapport side of things. I think that does get better. That clearly will get better with more time. If you remember, and I'm sure you do, if you go back and watch that play, it wasn't that Marvin Harrison wasn't looking at, or sorry, Kyler Murray wasn't looking at Marvin Harrison, is that he didn't come back to him. He had already looked at them on that play that everybody references. He just didn't come back in his progression and come back and check in on him. And I go back to the comparison I made after that happened was kind of the years of Russell Wilson and Tyler Lockett, where he didn't even have to look back. He just knew where Tyler Lockett was going to be. And Tyler Lockett was like, I know where I need to be when plays break down or the play's been extended. That comes with time, and I think both players are talented enough to work on that. So I do think that's going to get better. But I need that second aspect. I need him to be elite, and I need this offense to, surprisingly enough, he out-targeted Trey McBride in the end zone last year. Marvin Harrison was actually only behind names. I had the list before here. I'll pull it back up. He was only behind Jamar Chase with 21, which were the most end zone targets, tied with Mike Evans, Justin Jefferson, and Drake London. I think most people, if you tried to trivia question that, they'd be like, no way. Marvin Harrison probably had like 8 last year. He had 18 end zone, not red zone, end zone targets. That's insane. So I'm like, even if the rapport gets better, yeah, I do. Like if you told me, Jake, do you think there's a chance he's top 20 this year? I'd probably say I'll put my money on it. If you're going to tell me he's top 15, which sounds like a slim difference to make, I'm going to probably say like, now you're going to make, I would say even money on that one. And if you're pushing wide receiver 1 status, I'd say that's tough. So if he was at my ranking 23, to go back to similar with Rashee Rice, I'd say if he was 20, I'd probably be in a little bit more. 15 just feels, again, I go back to those names. Those are the same names. Terry McLaurin, Ladd McConkey, like those are the still names going around him that where I'm like, I'm just going to take them.
Yeah, the difference between wide receiver 20 and wide receiver 15 is slim, but it is meaningful.
Yes.
And I agree with a lot of what you said there. And like you, I thought I was going to be in a Marvin Harrison. I was thinking, yeah, like Drew Petzig, Kyler Murray, they're going to get this figured out. They're going to find a way to get Marvin Harrison involved. They invested a lot into him. He's a talented player. They'll figure this out. But he's already being drafted like they will figure it out. Not there's a chance that they figure it out. And that's the problem for me.
That's a great point. And that's something that I say every single year is not to buy all the risk. And it's tough. First 2-3 rounds, you have to. I mean, those are why those players are going there. It's not, you're buying a lot of the risk anyway. But it's after that, like the bigger point being is, as you said, when you start to take Marvin Harrison as the 15th wide receiver, you're buying that all that gets worked out. And you are taking all the risk because you're not associating any risk of, even if he improves on last year, but only half the improvement of getting to wide receiver 15. He'll still jump inside the top 22, top 20, but he'll still be a little bit off of wide receiver 15, which sometimes the difference between, I know we look a lot of times at wide receiver 20 to 30 as being 1 point per game, but sometimes there's 1 point per game between 15 and 20. It's like, it's still a small gap, but the gap's as big as 10 players behind them versus the 5.
Right, exactly. Now, we're going to take a quick second to hear about the FFPC, and when we get back, we're talking about Travis Hunter.
Hey, why do we partner with the FFPC? Because they have the widest variety of fantasy football formats, and it's the easiest place to find all types of fantasy football contests in the world. What if you want to play for high stakes? Well, they have a $6 million prize pool with their Fantasy Players Championship. They also have way too early best ball leagues that start in February and Dynasty leagues. They have the closest thing to a liquid market for orphans that there is in all of Dynasty. And the FFPC has sponsored us for half a decade because we are actually delivering information that can help fantasy gamers, and they're generating so much interest and bringing in so many new users, casual users even. The FFPC creates a unique experience where you can both compete against the best and make money. Use promo code UNDERWORLD to get $25 off your first team. $25 off your first team at the FFPC with promo code UNDERWORLD. Go get it!
Back here on press coverage with Jake Ciely, on to our third player of the day, which is Travis Hunter. Drafted second overall by the Jaguars after they traded up with the Cleveland Browns. Big investment there. Now his price. Wide receiver 28 on Fast Draft. Wide receiver 30 on Underdog. Wide receiver 31 on the FFPC. We know who he is in the way that he was one of the best college players we've ever seen. Won the Heisman, Fred Biletnikoff, and Chuck Banderick Award, all in 2024. One of the greatest college seasons we've ever seen, playing both sides of the ball very well. But we don't know what he's going to be in the NFL yet. We think he's going to play both ways. I believe most people, at least at this point, believe that he's going to play a lot in offense because the Jaguars seem to be pointing in that direction, that he's probably going to be more offense than defense. But we know Travis Hunter wants to go both ways. I imagine the Jaguars want to, placate that with him. So what do you think he's actually going to be able to do in the NFL? Is he Shohei Ohtani of the NFL? Is he going to be the greatest ever? That's what you have to reconcile with yourself when it comes to his cost, because he has just supreme movement skills. I think Matt Harmon's tracking of him and looking at his routes is just is off the charts because he just has different movement skills than the average player. How are you feeling about him?
Yeah, at this price, I'm actually okay with it. I know that is super enticing of I hate it or I love it. I'm just good with this because I did a lot of smash up comps for rookies coming out just because, two things is I went to this is the fantasy production you can make because all the people like Dane Brugler and the best of the world, the player profile, all of them give the actual players. And I'm why am I trying to replicate what everybody else does well? Let me give you the idea of what I expect as a fantasy production. The numbers might not, Marvin Harrison I was could be DJ Moore, to go back to him real quick. And I'm people are he's not DJ Moore. I was I know, let me clarify. He's more AJ Green, but the production could be like DJ Moore. So the production of what I think that Travis Hunter can be, and there is some of the skill set in there. And this was a fun one because it overlaps names. As I said, he's Devontae Smith and Jigba. But here's why I think this works really well for this cost in this discussion right here is because what is Devontae Smith and what was Jackson Smith and Jigba? Now he's the one, but both of them, what at one point they were, that being Smith and Jigba, and Devontae Smith still is the number two. Brian Thomas is the one. Travis Hunter steps in the number two. There's a case to be made if we knew he was only going to be wide receiver, he was the best wide receiver in this draft class. If you want to debate him versus McMillan, you can do it all day long with me because I think there's a case for both. But he's stepping in as the two. But Devontae Smith and Jackson Smith and Jigba can put up top 20 numbers. You just have seen through, and I say you as everybody we're talking to, you've seen over the years that when you are the number two, there's just a little bit more risk there. There's a chance that you could still put up a great season, but because you're the number two and things, maybe the touchdowns aren't there, or maybe the target share was lower and you're very productive on a per target basis, Jameson Williams, that you finish wide receiver 28. And it was still a really good season, but as we just talked about a little bit earlier, wide receiver 20 to 30 and possibly even past there is such a slim margin that one touchdown can make the difference. And I'm talking about on the season. So I'm okay with this because I think Travis Hunter could be pushing top 24 as a rookie, as the number two because of his talent. And a lot of that also, though, relies on Trevor Lawrence looking anything like the generational prospect that we all thought he was going to be. And he, honestly, to this point, and I think you agree, Wyatt, what we all thought of Trevor Lawrence, he's actually a bust at this point. If he doesn't turn his career around for what he was supposed to be, and I'm not even just talking fantasy, he's a bust right now, considering the lofty expectations. Maybe he's just an NFL quarterback mid-level, but that's a bust compared to what he was supposed to. But I say all that to present is that I could see Travis Hunter being in that basically like the DJ Moore production, the Devonta Smith production, Jalen Waddle if he stays healthy, Jameson Williams. And that's why I'm okay with this, because there's room for him to improve on this. And if he misses, and he actually plays, I think we do have to factor in that he maybe doesn't play 90% of the snaps on offense. But if he misses, I don't see him missing well outside the top 40. Like, I think we might see like, oh, he finished wide receiver 38. That was kind of disappointing. But at least as going as wide receiver 28 to 30, that's not going to kill your team.
I think that Travis Hunter could end up being like one of the greatest players we've ever seen. Wouldn't surprise me at all if that happens. I have a lot of trouble with this as a rookie when we have Brian Thomas there. If Brian Thomas wasn't there, I'd be all in the price. And I'm sure he'd have a higher price. So I guess I should say I'd have to readjust, based on what that new price is. But Brian Thomas proved himself to be an alpha in the league as a rookie. He was dominant. He had one of the best rookie wide receiver seasons that we've seen. So while I think Travis Hunter is going to be really good and potentially very good as a rookie, because Brian Thomas is there, I think he can only reach certain heights at this point, especially when we don't know exactly what that role will be between offense and defense. I expect when he's out there on offense to have a really high targets per route run. I imagine they're going to try and get him involved whenever he's in there, but then like scale back the actual snaps on offense to an extent. So I do think he's going to be productive. And I'll say this again, like volume drafting in these best ball formats, I am trying to get some exposure to Travis Hunter, but I'm trying to stay at market in those places. I'm not trying to get over my skis, and I don't want to miss out either. I do think Travis Hunter is like a player who can beat you because he could be that good. So I want to make sure I'm staying around market, but I'm not getting overexposed to Travis Hunter. I do think the future is very bright for him. It's just rookie year with so much unknown. You speak about Trevor Lawrence, like, it's true, he is kind of a bust based on the expectations we had for him. In a way, it's not a bust for the NFL because there's only so many starting quarterbacks. And I mean, there aren't even 32 really starting quarterbacks in the NFL. And if you got one signed to a second contract, you did okay, to an extent. But it's true, he has not reached those expectations. I think Liam Cohen's going to help him out, but who knows? Like there's just a lot there when I just rather just bet on Brian Thomas, like even at his high cost.
And I'm with you on that. And I think that if Travis Hunter was going wide receiver 24, where he kind of has to be Devonta Smith or even a little bit better, I'm going to be well out at this point. My rankings are actually even lower, but they're only 2 spots behind these ADP, well, 3 spots depending on which ADP you look at. But I'm right there with it. It's just at that price, I'm like, you know what? I'm willing to see that like maybe the talent is everything we've seen it to be, and he is clearly the number 2. And maybe they don't use him that much on defense. I still think there's going to be a risk, like, depending on what week it ends up being, and they're facing somebody of Jamar Chase's ilk, and it's like, man, we got to put a Hunter out there for a few snaps. He's just killing us. And then, like, well, does that mean he misses anything on the offense, or does it just mean that just got added on that game to your joke about Shohei Ohtani? But I think the talent is enough that. And the other aspect too is being the fact they got rid of Evan Ingram. Like you do have a significant volume piece out of the equation.
Yeah, that losing Evan Ingram is definitely a part of this. Like I think that he quite easily assumes whatever Evan Ingram was getting, potentially more than that. It's just he'll never reach where Brian Thomas is as a rookie.
Right, absolutely right.
Okay, our 4th player today, Deebo Samuel, who interestingly has the same wide receiver ADP at all 3 spots that I've been mentioning, but the overall ranking is very different. So on Fast Draft, he's 77th overall, Underdog 69th, FFPC 81. But I think there's some very good reason behind that. Fast Draft, it's a PPR site. Underdog, half PPR. I think it makes sense for him to be a little bit higher in half PPR. FFPC, we've got the tight end premium, pushes some tight ends up, which could have him coming back in ADP a little bit. I just thought that was really interesting how he kind of varied so much overall between those 3. But so last year, 10.2 PPR points per game, lowest of his career. 55th in yards per out run, 51st in yards per team pass attempt. But we knew that he was dealing with a lot of stuff. He had a calf strain at one point, a wrist injury, a rib injury, pneumonia at a certain point. But he's also getting up there in age, and he's probably had one of the hardest times out there for a wide receiver that we've seen in a long time because of the nature of his game and the fact that he also played running back at times.
Yep.
So we have to try and figure out how much of this is all those injuries causing lack of production. How much is this age? Is the combination of both? Can all this go away now on the Commanders, where they needed somebody like Deebo Samuel on their team. Truthfully, I think it fits into the team very well. I thought it was a smart move. I'm not sure what kind of production we're going to get. What do you think?
Yeah, and I think that the need, I'm glad you brought that up, because if you take out Zach Ertz and the litany of running backs that were thrown to last year, you're still left with about 200 targets for all the rest of these joker wide receivers they were dealing with last year. And I don't mean joker in the Sean Payton term. I mean joker as in, like, why
There's
are we
a lot
doing
of those
this?
too.
Yeah, they are a lot of those too. And I'm not saying he's going to get 200 targets, but let's just say he gets 50% of those. Because you brought it up. It's like, this was a need. You saw them desperately trying to figure out who the two is next to Terry McLaurin all year long. I mean, you had Zacchaeus running out there as the two at times, and then Noah Brown in the play, Diami Brown out there. Like, they just were trying everything. Even Luke McCaffrey at times, they're trying. They signed Jameson Crowder back at the end of the year. Like, there was just, or was he there for a while? They finally debuted him, whatever it might be. The point being is they need somebody. They need Deebo Samuel, which also helps open up Terry McLaurin downfield more and get some of that coverage off him. This is a need. And this is another one where I'm going to say I'm good with this cost, because I bring up the 100 targets to say go back to 2 years ago and forget Deebo Samuel, the runner. Let's just say that's out of the equation, because that one season was never going to happen again anyway. But I think even at this point in his career, you bring it up, he's 29 years old, not super old, but we're also getting to the point where it's like, he's just not as effective out of the backfield as he was before. He's not much of a threat where defenses are like, oh my God, we're going to crash the linebackers in secondary. And boom, it opens up other things by the future plays pulling off of that. It's more so he's just, oh, there's a run or two, and okay, cool, whatever. So I think you're looking at Deebo Samuel pretty much mostly wide receiver at this point. So 100 targets, this is somebody who can put up 1,000 yards, 5, 6, 7 touchdowns on 100 targets. He came very close to those numbers on, I think it was like 90 to 95 targets just a few years ago. And I think it was like 2 years ago. So it's not like he's that much younger at that point, but I think everything you brought up to is the injuries, the illness. Like, there was a lot going on last year. I mean, the 49ers were disjointed from the start, just their entire offense, because McCaffrey was out, then Deebo wasn't healthy, and then Ayuk hurt. Like, there's just like they couldn't get a flow going on top of it. Brock Purdy kind of had a rough spot a couple times throughout last year. So, present all that to say, I do think there's still potential to be top 25. This is another one. Would I bet on it? Absolutely not. Would I be shocked if he finishes right here at his ADP? Not at all. Like, I actually think this is probably, like, if you give me an estimation on where he finishes production-wise, wide receiver 39, over-under, I'd be like, pass, I'm not betting on that one. But I think we're near his floor, at least. Like, I don't see him doing much worse. And so while maybe you take him at 39 and he doesn't do anything more than that, and you're like, well, that kind of stunk. He was just exactly what I get at wide receiver 39. I think that's why I'm in on him, because I feel like this is worst case. Wide receiver 39, like 800 yards and 6 touchdowns. Like, don't you feel like that's kind of his floor, even at 29 in this offense? I guess the bigger question for you and anybody is, how much more do you think the Commanders are going to pass? Because if you think it's, 510 times for Jaden Daniels versus 480, that's enough to say, okay, that 100 targets feels a lot better. If you think last year might be it, and it's another 500 for the team, then you can see how it becomes a little bit dicier to guarantee, like, hey, he's going to get those 100 targets.
I'll be honest with you, I've drafted very little Deebo Samuel this year.
Yeah.
He is one of the players who, like, I'm not afraid of him beating me by not having exposure to
That's
him.
a good way to put it. And there's no way, sorry to jump in, there's no way at 69th overall I would ever take him. I don't care the format. Like, that goes back to, like, the buying all the risk. Like, 77th, 81st, cool, especially fast draft on that with the PPR. Like, cool, I'll get on that. The other two, or the 69 on underdog, no thank you.
And to your questions and your points, I think, the kind of projection you gave out for him, assuming he's healthy, I do think that is around what would be considered, I think, a floor for him. And I do think that we can count on pass attempts from Washington, or I should say called pass plays, because a lot of those end up being scrambles for Jaden Daniels, because that's what Cliff Kingsbury likes to do. He likes to run at a fast pace and throw at a high rate. Those pass attempts came down just a little bit because of Jaden Daniels himself and the way he plays football. Right. It's just I don't have enough trust in Deebo Samuel making it through the year producing consistently for me. And at his his price, I mean, wide receiver 39, it's fairly low. But in these drafts, these overall slots, like we're still talking about a draft position where it's someone you have to count on. And I don't want to have to count on Deebo Samuel. If I lose to Deebo Samuel in 2025, so be it. I'll take my loss.
That's a fair way to look at it, too. I'm not going to argue hard. That's why I said this. I will have my strongest opinion last. Because, I've had two I'm completely out on. Two, I'm like, okay, cool. Here's one. I'm teasing it for everybody. This is the one where I'm going to be like, yes, I'm 100% in on this one.
Okay, love to hear it. We're going to go right in. Josh Downs, who is the belle of the ball right now. Basically, ever since Daniel Jones is presumed to be the starter moving forward. So prices. Under fast draft, wide receiver 42, underdog, wide receiver 46, FFPC, wide receiver 43. I think in 2024, proved to any naysayers out there that he is good at football. 13.1 PPR points per game, which was wide receiver 28, led the Colts in target share with 25.6%. He was a very good prospect coming into the NFL. The only really knock on him is that he's 5'9", 170 pounds. And those wide receivers tend not to be the largest producers in the NFL. We've seen a little bit of a shift in the NFL over more recent years of some smaller wide receivers getting there. But he's like right on the edge of what we could say is like good enough size-wise to still have some confidence. And that size perhaps contributes to his low snap share, where he only had 65.9% snap share,
right,
which is 69th among wide receivers, because he basically only plays out of slot at this time. Now, I believe he is someone who could play outside. He's going to have some toughness with anyone every time he has to deal against press coverage, just by the nature of his size. But that's what you have Alec Pierce to do. He lines up at X. Josh Downs can play, the flanker out there. I think he's good enough of a route runner, as long as he doesn't actually have to beat the press to go out there and do that. Love to see those routes come up. But I'm going to pass it back to you now because I know you're excited, so let's go.
I am, because everything you said in there, I think the interesting part is you bring up the snap share, and that's like he did all that with a terrible snap share because of what people, and I'm not going to say he doesn't have his concerns. You brought up his concerns, and the concerns are, can he stay on the field? Is he consistent enough both inside and out where he's enough of a threat outside that maybe, the target share when only working outside is 10%, but inside it's 30%. So you get where I'm going with this. Like, just that alone would give him the consistency to get that snap share up to like 80+%. And if you tell me 80+%, the reason I like Josh Downs is you brought up the Daniel Jones thing, and I don't even want to go down this argument because we're not. No. What I'm saying is that because like I'm on the side, like you start Anthony Richardson if he's healthy, you figure out where it is, and like if he goes bust, so be it. We know who Daniel Jones is, and I'm not saying I'm coming for you, and that's why I said I want to make this argument, because I'm presenting all this. There's a point to it. We've already seen the beat writers for the Colts being like, oh, look, we're seeing exactly the problems with Daniel Jones that the Giants had all these years. You bring up Alec Pierce, and 7-on-7s, mind you, busting free downfield, and Daniel Jones still can't hit him. Why? Because Daniel Jones can't throw well downfield. He's basically Eli Manning trying to throw downfield. How many times do we watch a wide receiver bust free for the Giants? And we're like, well, Eli Manning missed him by 5 yards. Whoops. So I'm saying that like they're already seeing the issues, where I'm saying give Anthony Richardson a chance. But here's why I'm saying we don't need to go down that road. It's because this is what I've said about Josh Downs. I think he plays well no matter who the quarterback is. Whether it's Anthony Richardson, Daniel Jones, or Joe Flacco gets cut by the Browns and they bring him back. Like, I don't care who the quarterback is for Josh Downs, because I think he checks the boxes to fit with any quarterback. Of course, offenses will change depending on who the quarterback is, but the overlap from Richardson to Jones is enough that I'm not concerned about it, because you bring it up. He gets into space and free so easily. Outside, yes, an issue. Fast, tough corners, going to jam him up, probably for days. But that dimension of being able to run those deep kind of seam routes, this is what I liked about him coming out of college and why I had him a sleeper with Anthony Richardson. Because you go back to Anthony Richardson in college, what did he have a heyday doing? Throwing those deep slot seam routes, boom, all day long. And it's like, Josh Downs can do that. And you saw it, and you saw him do that. It ended up being Alec Pierce at times, and maybe that's the threat. Maybe that's, well, Alec Pierce isn't going to go away, and they found something in him. But similar to the Deebo Samuel situation we talked about, I would take him before I take Deebo Samuel, because there's a world where I see Josh Downs finishing top 25. Again, long odds, not the best team to do it on. And there's all these things we're talking about working against him, but there's all these upsides too, where to kind of use something you said, because I know Josh Downs' talent, I don't want to see him beat me. I actually think if you went ceiling versus ceiling, Downs versus Deebo, I would take the ceiling of Downs. And the one thing we haven't even brought up, if everybody's like, well, Michael, the naysayers, well, Michael Pittman was dealing with a back injury all year, blah, blah. Like, why are we just assuming a back injury is going away? Like, that used to be like, steer clear, like get the hell away from players with back injuries. Because I don't know about you, like I'm now in my 40s and I know Michael Pittman is nowhere near my age because I'm in my 40s, but I wake up with a bad back and that thing bothers me for like 2 days. Like back injuries to his severity, even at 20 something years old, they don't just go away like the next year. So I think it's weird that everybody's playing this injury optimism game with Michael Pittman. The naysayers are.
I'll take it a step even further with Michael Pittman. He could be fully healthy, and it doesn't bother me with Josh Downs because, one, they're really the only pass catchers on the team worth a damn at this point that I think can really command any targets. So I think even if they're both fully healthy, it's going to consolidate around those two, and I think they'll both get theirs. But also, I think Josh Downs is the more talented player, straight up. And I completely agree with you about I would take Josh Downs over Deebo Samuel every single time. I think that Josh Downs is a player who can beat you because he is that good. And while I do like Daniel Jones for Josh Downs over Anthony Richardson at this time, mostly because I think that he could be kind of a PPR machine with Daniel Jones.
Just I agree with
intermediate. I mean, you probably have some more efficiency increase with Anthony Richardson if he's working downfield a little bit more. But I like to rely on that target volume from Daniel Jones. But regardless, this is a bet on talent situation where Josh Downs is just a really talented player.
I didn't bring this up, and this will give the naysayers an extra little bonus thing for them to come for me. I will say the biggest concern I have that we haven't even talked about, it's not so much Tyler Warren in his own right. It's actually if it is Daniel Jones, now the added Tyler Warren, because Daniel Jones, for all his flaws, the one thing I said about him coming out of college, and as we've seen in the NFL, is he's actually good in the short to intermediate area. Like, he can hit those, and he can hit those a lot. Well, if Tyler Warren is doing his thing and benefiting from Daniel Jones being a quarterback, and all of a sudden, to go back to our concerns, our slight ones, but let's say Alec Pierce plays outside, Josh Downs doesn't see a snap share get over 60-something%, and Tyler Warren ends up making an impact from day one, Downs is going to be the one that loses because of that. But I think that's a lot of ifs where, like, I think there's more ifs for him to have a disappointing season than there are ifs for him to be a breakout.
Yeah, I think Occam's razor would just say Josh Downs is really talented, so he'll
be fine. Take the easiest answer.
Yeah, I think so. All right, this was great, Jake. I really appreciate you joining me. Before we get out of here, let everyone know where to find you and find all your work.
Yeah, over at The Athletic, guest podcasting. There's the tooth. It's messing me up at the end. Doing regular guest podcasts over with the Fantasy Pros crew. And then, of course, when awesome people like you guys ask me to come on. But yeah, everything's over at The Athletic. And everybody's like, oh, it's a pay for site. Like, trust me, you click on it, it's like $1 a month for the first year is just kind of like the common offer at this point. So $12. I mean, go to Chick-fil-A, you're spending more.
Perfect. Yeah. How do you not get in at that price? As for me, you can follow me on Twitter, YP_FF.
Oh, the tooth got you.
Yeah, now it's in my head. Make sure you're liking and subscribing to everything Player Profiler. Sign up to Fast Draft if you haven't already. Use code WYAT for a $50 deposit match. I appreciate all of you. We'll see you next time.